Hello, I'm Nadira Hira, your MC for this year's SDG Global Festival of Action. And I'm so excited to be presenting one of our very special Turning Point dialogues. On the heels of a year full of challenges, a global pandemic marked by economic, political, and social turmoil, we've seen dramatic shifts in how we think about living and earning, consuming, and producing. Things that were deemed too ambitious or expensive even to entertain before now seem not just doable, but downright imperative, which means that this incredibly difficult moment may also be a potentially unparalleled opportunity to build a more just and sustainable society. So, how do we together make this a true turning point for people and for planet? Well, here to talk about it with us is the author of Exposure: Poisoned Water, Corporate Greed, and One Lawyer's 20-year Battle Against DuPont. A man who was a corporate defense attorney for 8 years, only to take on an environmental suit that would upend his entire career and expose a brazen, decades-long history of massive chemical contamination. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that his story is the inspiration for the Hollywood film Dark Waters, in which he's played by Mark Ruffalo. Welcome, Rob Bilott. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
So why don't we just jump in? In 2020, Participant Media launched the Fight Forever's Chemicals campaign in conjunction with Dark Waters. And they've said what a force you were in championing the cause, just as you clearly have been for all these years, battling chemical contamination on the legal front. So as we consider the power and opportunity of this moment, I guess I'd love to start with just taking action. What pushed you to act, especially when it would have been so much easier to stick to the status quo? What made this your fight?
Actually, when I started digging into documents that I got from DuPont and saw that we were facing what was really unprecedented global contamination by man-made chemicals, and that were in the drinking water probably of millions of people all over the planet, in blood of virtually every living creature, including people all over the planet. But then realizing that I may be the only one seeing these documents, that this was information that had been withheld, and that the scientists, the regulators, the public didn't know about this. And this was happening in what I viewed as sort of my hometown, Parkersburg, West Virginia, where my mom and her whole family had grown up. And I realized, that I needed to do something to make sure that people were aware of this public health threat. And I'm hoping that when people see this story and see the actions that people like Earl Tennant, the farmer in West Virginia, who first discovered there was a problem here, they realize that each individual can take action. We shouldn't sit back and just assume somebody else is going to take care of this for us. Looking at this information, realizing I had a responsibility. This was a public health threat that nobody knew about. And I needed to do what I could do as a lawyer, to work in the legal system and to work with others, scientists, regulators, people in the media, people that could help get this story out. And it was an incredible opportunity to work with people like Mark Ruffalo and the folks at Participant, who were able to find a way to convey what seemed like complex legal and scientific information, to bring it out to people and so that they can understand why this was a story that mattered to all of us, affected all of us. And to do that in such a visual way and to be able to bring that story and show people how this affects real people was an incredible opportunity, and so fortunate to be able to have people like that help bring this story out to people.
And it sounds like a wonderful combination of, if not me, who, and then this community that you talk about. And you've said that this community sort of came together to make sure that Forever Chemicals wouldn't affect anybody else, that this wouldn't happen to other communities in the future. And it certainly had an effect. Just the term Forever Chemicals is now in the zeitgeist in a way that it never was before. So I wonder if you could just reflect on your experience of the influence film and media can exert, both on the behavior of these long established companies like DuPont and also on the mindsets of everyday people.
It's an incredibly powerful force to be able to have folks put a movie together or a documentary, or to write feature articles in major newspapers or television shows, That is so incredibly powerful and so important. Because again, having something that this is this complex about complicated chemicals with complicated names and difficult legal terms, to be able to have folks in the field, in journalism, in the media that are able to bring that story out in a way that people understand why it's important, and to give people an opportunity to learn about how this affects real people in other communities is incredibly powerful. And this, we wouldn't be talking about this. The world wouldn't know about forever chemicals if it weren't for the incredible journalists, investigative reporters, and folks like participants in the media, and being able to do books and things of that nature for people to understand the story. And bringing the story out is critical.
What have been some of the reactions that you've had that have surprised you the most, or that have been the most interesting, or maybe even the most rewarding, since this has been sort of your life's work up to this point?
Well, I think it's still amazing to me, even though we've been working on this now. I think we're in year 23 of trying
My goodness.
to do what we can to get this story out and to make sure that regulators and scientists understand the threat posed by these chemicals. It's still remarkable how many people will find a story and respond saying, I never heard of this. How is this possible? How do we have chemicals that are over the entire planet, in everyone's blood and everyone's drinking water, chemicals that might even impair our immune systems and affect the ability and the effectiveness of vaccines during the time of a pandemic? How does something like this happen and we aren't all talking about it? That to me is still remarkable, that even with a movie, even with a book and documentary and the coverage that we do have, more is needed, more discussion, more people talking, more ways to reach out and connect in different ways, and find ways to bring lawyers and journalists and scientists and regulators, all of these different sectors of our community together, and make sure we can find a way that we all understand the importance of the same story that affects all of us.
So it's 23 years and counting. The work continues, truly. What can we do, sort of the festival participants out there and folks who aren't engaged in this in the community that you've mentioned, journalists and scientists, what can we do to support your work and join the fight?
Talk about this. Do what Mr. Tennant, the farmer in West Virginia who first came to me 23 years ago asking for help about his cows, do what he did. Stand up, speak out, talk about this. Again, don't assume somebody else is taking care of this, that somebody else is handling it, that scientists are working on it. No, it's up to each of us. And if anything, from what you see in the film and you see about this story about how we came to learn about PFOA, if anything, it highlights the power of individuals coming out, speaking out, and the power of communities connecting with each other and demanding that things can be changed. And what seems like insurmountable odds and immovable forces, massive corporations or massive legal systems and scientific systems and regulatory systems, people speaking out, taking action can result in unbelievable change. And it's happening. And I'm hoping people are inspired by this story to know we can do it. We can actually change these systems.
I guarantee that they're inspired. We're inspired. So speaking of changing the systems, what do you think, if you had to pinpoint something, could actually stop this contamination from happening in the future? Is there one thing that comes to mind?
Well, I would hope that we would be able to start adopting a much more precautionary approach to chemicals like this, completely man-made chemicals that our bodies don't know how to handle. We should be taking an approach that says, if we have information that these things might be harming us, let's stop it now. Let's not force the people who are exposed, the people that are being used as guinea pigs, to be the ones that have to prove that the chemicals causing them harm and making them sick or dropping dead before we do something. We need to be taking a much more precautionary approach. And I think we're starting to see that happen now.
I just want to cheer for you, because it's absolutely right. This idea that the onus is on the victims, so to speak, rather than on the producers or the people who are profiting, it seems like a no-brainer. And yet it is stories like the one you're talking about and the one that you're the center of that are actually changing the way people see these things. So as we wrap up our time together, I have to ask two last questions. One, for folks who want to find out more and get involved, are there other resources besides obviously watching Dark Waters and reading your books that you would point them to? And just lastly, just a note of inspiration. You are obviously an inspiring figure in so many ways, but we would love to know what inspires you. So is there a piece of music or art or a book or anything that you would encourage our folks to check out to feel some of this joy and passion that you so clearly feel naturally?
I guess what really inspires me is somebody like Earl Tennant, the
Mhm.
farmer in West Virginia, who was able to speak out and prompt change like this that is now changing the world. And it's fortunate that we can see his story in a film, Dark Waters, the documentary, or a book that it's now getting into the world of art, and people can see this story in different ways. So that I think is incredibly inspiring, and I still think about him to this day as somebody who was willing to stand up, take a chance, demand that things be changed, and he was able to do it. And so all of us now can see that story and be inspired by it.
And he was able to inspire you in a very specific way too, as well, to go from a career that was in some ways on the other side of this conversation to the place that you are now, which I can just tell you is deeply affecting for all of us. So thank you, Rob Bilott, for the work that you do, for being with us here at the SDG Global Festival of Action. And we hope to see so much more of you.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Too.